Hey everyone, I'm Kristen McGlory, and this week's Genius recipe is perfect for when you want something hearty and cozy, but you also just want to eat a whole bunch of greens. This recipe comes from the legendary cookbook author and cooking teacher, Julie Sani, and her cookbook, Classic Indian Vegetarian and Grain Cooking. And I have just been stemming these mustard greens and these cute little spinaches that I got. And that's really the only thing that takes a lot of active presence from you if you're going to use fresh greens, just stemming and washing and roughly chopping these. But Julie also allows for using frozen greens. So in case you don't have time to prep all your greens or you don't have access to greens at the time you want to make it, frozen greens are totally fine. This is mustard and this is spinach, but you can use other greens that you have access to. So stems are out. And these are gonna cook for a while, so you don't have to stress too much about getting every bit of stem, just the really tougher bits. I'm going to finish roughly chopping these to add to my pile. In the meantime, here is Julie to tell you more about where this dish comes from.
This recipe, which we're talking about, is called Saag. And Saag means greens. And it comes from the northwestern region of Punjab. So this particular greens preparation is not just one green, it's a combination of several. At least 3 of them are combined in a traditional way, in a traditional dish, saag dish. And that is mustard greens. And then the second one is actually called bathua. Bathua is actually lamb's quarters, and which is like a French mâche, which is used in salads. So you can of course substitute spinach if you don't have this particular greens. And then the third one is fenugreek greens. So mustard greens and the fenugreek greens both are considered as warm greens. In winter time is when this particular dish is really loved.
Okay, so to get these greens started, we just need to get a few things up to a boil. Some water, some corn flour or cornmeal, a couple hot green chilies chopped. I used jalapeno. And some asafetida, which is also called hing in Hindi, and it just gives this really delicious oniony kind of funky flavor. Julie says you can also substitute minced onion if you don't have asafetida, but the flavor of it is really amazing. That just needs to come up to a boil, and then we are going to wilt in all of our greens. And how we're gonna get that mountain of greens in, they're all gonna wilt and compress. But you do want to grab your biggest pot for this. Just enough liquid to give the greens something to start wilting down into, flavorful liquid from the chilies and the asafetida, and then the cornmeal or corn flour is going to start thickening them right away. At the end, we'll add in a little bit of cornstarch in a slurry too to finish thickening them up so that they really are greens that eat like a complete meal. So satisfying to see these collapse. All right, still got more coming, but I need to make some room. Look at that, it's already, all of those mustard greens are already that teeny. Now I can add some more. So even if you don't think your greens are gonna fit, they will. So your liquid amounts might need to vary a little bit depending on which greens you use, whether you use frozen or fresh, and whether you use fresh or dried fenugreek leaves. And now is a good time to add the chopped green bell pepper and the fenugreek leaves. These are dried. Easy to keep on hand even if you can't find fresh fenugreek leaves. Oh, and they just add so much fragrance. They really are worth keeping on hand for any time you want to make this recipe. But Julie has some tips for what to look for, whatever greens you're using.
So fenugreek greens, if you're going to add dried fenugreek, you have to watch out and how much liquid you add. And also if you're adding spinach, which variety of spinach you're adding, you have to, or substituting the mustard greens, for example, because mustard greens can be substituted with broccoli rabe if you want. And if you do that, then all of them have a different level of moisture in them. So instead of dumping a whole lot of water, you can add, because it's a long, prolonged cooking, so you can hold some of the water and add as you go along. So that in the end, you have just enough water so that the vegetables are just covered in it, so that when you puree it, it is like a thick bean soup.
So part of what makes this dish so comforting and cozy is this rich top, which is basically just slivered garlic and ginger, sizzled in ghee, poured over the top. You may recognize this technique. It is a foundational one used across India, and we have featured it in Genius recipes past, like Chitra Agarwal's Hoogi recipe and Priya Krishna's cherry tomato and chili pickle. I am going to slice away. In the meantime, here is Julie to tell you a little bit more about how this technique works in this recipe.
This particular technique called tarka is a literal translation is spice-infused butter. It could be spice-infused oil too, but traditionally it's spice-infused butter or spice-infused clarified butter, which is ghee. So in this technique, you heat the ghee or the clarified butter, and then you put some ingredients, it's spices or seasoning, and you let it cook really well till it browns. If it is whole spices, then you cook it fully till it browns. Or if you're adding seasonings like ginger and garlic, you wait till it caramelizes, and then you pour this over the finished dish. So adding a tarka is actually almost like adding a garnish on a dish. However, in Indian style cooking, oftentimes the garnish is folded into the dish, so it isn't left right on top.
There's that, and then I will peel some ginger. Okay, these are, wow, they smell amazing. They are super tender. They've been cooking for about an hour. So it's time to blend them. We're supposed to wait until they're slightly cool and do this in batches. And no matter what, when you're pureeing a hot liquid in the blender or food processor, make sure that you don't have a totally sealed vessel because steam is gonna need to escape. Take this whole thingy out of the lid. Take that off and cover it with a towel. You'll see. So you could even do this with like an immersion blender right in the pot, but I'm gonna go for a really super smooth texture. All right, we have our super smooth puree. Just gonna do one more batch. I can't tell you how incredible this smells. Very glad I have this truly genius ladle. It bends so you can get every last bit out of the corners of the pot. Check this out. Okay. Normal ladles would leave everything in the corners. You can feel it like bucking against the towel. You definitely do not want a lid on here that's completely sealed. So all of our beautiful puree is going back in to thicken with a little bit of cornstarch. And then this is just gonna cook over low heat for 6 to 10 minutes until it thickens. And in the meantime, we can start getting that topping ready.
Remember, we're talking about recipes from India which are centuries old, and they didn't have any appliances and all those. And now we've got blenders and food processors and all that. So they used simple gadgets made with wood or metal to blend ingredients. So they would use a apparatus called methi. And methi is a wooden appliance which basically what it does is it crushes and blends simultaneously. So this is methi. So it almost looks like an umbrella. And so you put it in the pan, and then you go like that. So while doing this churning, the bottom part kind of mixes it and also crushes slightly. And you want a big crush, then you go down like that. So it kind of crushes, and then this is called ghotna. Ghotna meaning mixing. So all three motions are done. You do like that, and you do this, and you do this. And you do it for a few minutes, and you have this mixing of the ingredients together, and you won't need any other, kind of a binding agent.
Now it is time to make our topping. It's gonna hang out on the side. And we're gonna start with some ghee. So 4 to 6 tablespoons of ghee. Pretty sure as I was measuring, I just went for it with the 6 tablespoons. Okay, this is nice and hot. I just turned it down to medium low, and I'm going to grab my ginger and garlic that I prepped earlier and get those sizzling. Ooh, they're gonna need to make this leap over the juice groove. Wow. It smells incredible. So this is just gonna cook for a couple minutes until it starts to brown a little bit. And that ghee is going to be intensely flavored with the ginger and garlic at that point. I'm really starting to smell the ginger now. How about you? And the garlic? All right, so this is exactly what you're looking for. It's just starting to turn brown. I'm going to turn off the heat and get ready to plate it up over there. And here is Julie to tell you a little bit more about how she likes to serve this recipe.
So the traditional way, of course, is makke ki roti, which is the cornbread. And cornbread can be pretty heavy. And also, to make that bread and all that, it's almost very difficult to get ready-made cornbread, by the way. The Indian style, Indian cornbread. You can always get tortillas and all that. That's totally different. Although tortillas would taste very good with this. So you could serve it with a pita bread, which is in case you want to stay with a bread theme. So pita bread would be very good. The other thing I personally like is really good batch of basmati rice. If you make a nice batch of basmati rice and put that over, on that. I mean, put the saag, the greens on top, which is really like a puree. And then I always like to add something kind of a crunchy to go with it, because it's all puree and mushy type. So I like to boil like a Yukon Gold potatoes. If I have a one-day-old baked potato, that's even better. And then I cut it into little pieces, if it is a large one, and then pan sear it and a little bit of oil or butter, and put some black pepper and little honey or maple sugar, and just pan sear it so that it gets all glazed and crackling, and it is just unbelievably delicious by itself. And I just add this on top.
All right, we have Sarsoon ka saag, our fragrant butter-laced mustard greens, and wow, are they fragrant. And then here's our topping. So just give it a couple stirs to swirl the topping in streaks, but not fully mix it in. Okay, one more thing, that beautiful melting butter pat is coming. It is just hard to imagine greens becoming more flavorful, more rich, more comforting, all on their own. I want to do this anytime that I am just craving nourishment and greens and comfort, or just anytime that I find myself with bunches and bunches of delicious bitter wintry greens that need a home. I would love to hear what you all do when you are craving comfort in winter, but you also want it to be really loaded with vegetables. Please let me know in the comments. If you would like more Genius recipes, be sure to hit like and subscribe, and you will get them every time they come out every couple weeks. And please don't miss the rest of my conversation with Julie Sani over on the Genius Recipe Tapes. You can find that anywhere you get your podcasts, and get a copy of this classic for your shelf. Thank you so much. We will see you in 2 weeks. And special thanks to my brother Billy, who introduced me to this technique of Julie's and uses it anytime he wants to eat a lot of greens.